In a world that spins faster with every passing day, where our hearts grow weary from striving, comparing, longing, where silence feels foreign, and peace is something we postpone for someday, the wisdom of the Buddha comes not as a whisper, but as a profound remembering. You already hold the answers. The clarity you seek is within you. But first, you must pause. Listen. Turn inward. This is not a teaching of escape. It is not a path reserved for monks, mountains, or mystics. It is a path for you. The everyday seeker, the quiet warrior, the soul caught between deadlines and dreams. It is a way back to what is real. What is whole? What is now? In the next few moments, you will walk through 5 timeless teachings. Not as abstract philosophy, but as living truth. Teachings that speak to your anxiety, your longing, your hidden strength. Each one is a mirror. Each one is a door. So take a breath. Set down your burdens. And begin not by reaching outward, but by returning inward. This is not just Buddhist wisdom. This is your invitation to wake up. Mind precedes all phenomena, a deep contemplation on the Buddha's first teaching. Inspired by Dhammapada verse 1, Manopubhagam Dhamma, Manasa Manamaya. The mirror of reality is the mind. The very first verse of the Dhammapada begins not with a command, but with a revelation. Mind precedes all phenomena. Mind is their chief, they are all mind-made. This ancient insight is not merely poetic or philosophical, it is radical. It turns the entire direction of human striving inward. In a world where we habitually seek to fix, control, or escape the external, the Buddha's teaching redirects our attention to the true architect of suffering and liberation, the mind. In today's frantic, overstimulated age, where anxiety is rampant, identity is unstable, and reality itself seems fragmented, this teaching is more relevant than ever. The crises we face are not merely environmental, political, or economic. They are deeply psychological. And at their core is the mind. Untrained, distracted, and burdened by illusion. This essay explores what it means that all things are mind-made. Through the lens of Buddhist psychology, personal reflection, and contemplative practice, we will unpack how this teaching helps us understand suffering, transformation, and freedom in everyday life. What the Buddha meant, the mind as the forerunner. When the Buddha declared, mind precedes all dhammas, phenomena, he was not being abstract. In Pali, Manopubhagam Dhamma means that all experiences, actions, and conditions, everything from joy and pain to war and peace, begin in the mind. In this context, mind, mano, refers to the total field of mental activity, thoughts, intentions, perceptions, moods, memory, and volition. In other words, your world is shaped not by what happens to you, but by how your mind meets what happens. We tend to believe reality is out there, fixed, objective, solid. But Buddhist thought suggests a more subtle understanding. Our perception of reality is always filtered through mind. The way we interpret events, people, and even ourselves arises from our mental habits, past conditioning, and karmic patterns. When the Buddha says, mind is the chief, he is reminding us that the mind is not passive. It is generative. It constructs the world moment by moment. If the mind is angry, the world looks threatening. If the mind is calm, the same world feels open. The shift is internal, but the transformation is total. This is not mere metaphysics. It is a call to responsibility. The architecture of suffering is mental. From the Buddhist perspective, suffering, dukkha, is not primarily caused by external conditions, but by how the mind relates to them. For example, losing a job can be devastating, but the suffering does not arise solely from the loss itself. It arises from thoughts like, I'm a failure, I'll never recover, what will people think? These are mental reactions, not the event itself. And they hurt more than the reality they respond to. Similarly, anxiety often emerges from projecting mental images of the future. Images that may never come true. Jealousy is the product of comparing mental constructs. Even pride and shame are not inherent in events, but born of thought. As the Zen saying goes, 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows. Same mind. To recognize this is not to invalidate pain. It is to understand its architecture. When you see that suffering is mind-made, you also see that it can be unmade. You no longer have to be at the mercy of thoughts. You can train the mind. And that is the essence of the path. Neuroplasticity and the modern mirror. Modern neuroscience has, in many ways, confirmed what the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago. The concept of neuroplasticity shows that the brain is not fixed, that it is malleable. Our thoughts, habits, and emotional responses create neural patterns that become our default ways of seeing and reacting. In simple terms, the more you think a thought, the more likely you are to think it again. The mind creates grooves, like a river carving into stone. If your habitual mental states are fear, judgment, or scarcity, your brain becomes wired for those responses. This is not destiny. It is habit. And it can be changed. Meditation, mindfulness, and loving-kindness practices literally rewire the brain. They cultivate states like equanimity, clarity, and compassion. Not by force, but by repetition and intention. In this way, the Buddha's teaching becomes not just spiritual, but practical. It is not about belief. It is about training the mind the way you might train a muscle or an instrument. And just as untrained muscles cause pain, so does an untrained mind. Daily life is mind training. Once you understand that the mind creates your experience, you begin to see that every moment is a chance to train the mind. You don't need to be in a monastery. Life itself becomes the dojo. When someone criticizes you, you can react with defensiveness. Or you can pause, feel the sting, and respond with curiosity. That pause is a micro moment of liberation. When jealousy arises, you can spiral into resentment. Or you can observe it, breathe, and recognize it as an old pattern not worth feeding. When sadness appears, you can resist it. Or you can meet it with compassion and allow it to soften into presence. The Buddha's teaching is not a rejection of emotion, but a re-education of reactivity. The point is not to suppress feeling, but to understand that feelings arise, pass, and do not define you unless you cling to them. And what enables that letting go? A mind that has seen its own patterns clearly. Mind and karma, the seeds we plant. In Buddhist thought, karma is often misunderstood as fatalism. But it simply means action. Specifically, intentional mental action. Each thought you nurture, each attitude you dwell in, each reaction you choose. These plant seeds in the mind. The mind is like a garden. What you water grows. If you water judgment, fear, and craving, they flourish. If you water mindfulness, compassion, and patience, they deepen. And just as you cannot plant mango seeds and expect roses, you cannot cultivate resentment and expect peace. The Buddha's emphasis on the mind is not to shame us, but to empower us. Your future is not fixed. Your mental habits are not you. They are patterns. And patterns can be transformed. This is profoundly liberating. You don't need to change the world to be free. You need to change your relationship with your own mind. And that, the Buddha assures us, is possible for everyone. The mind as a mirror, not a master. One of the deepest implications of this teaching is that the mind, when untrained, becomes a tyrant. It constantly comments, compares, worries, resents. It clings to the past, obsesses over the future, and is never quite here. But through practice, the mind can become what it was meant to be, a mirror. Still. Clear. Reflecting things as they are without distortion. In this mirror mind, thoughts still arise. But they do not overwhelm. Emotions still visit. But they do not possess. Identity still functions. But it is seen as fluid, not fixed. This is the fruit of the path, a mind no longer at war with itself. A mind that is not your enemy, but your ally. Real-world examples, where the teaching comes alive. In relationships, a person speaks harshly to you. An untrained mind interprets, they hate me. I must retaliate. A trained mind observes, their pain is SPE. Result, peace instead of escalation. In anxiety, an unexpected expense arises. The untrained mind panics, I'm doomed. The trained mind breathes, this is difficult, but manageable. I've faced worse. Result, steadiness instead of collapse. In self-image, you make a mistake at work. The untrained mind attacks, I'm a failure. The trained mind says, that was unskillful. I can learn. Result, growth instead of shame. In each case, the situation did not change. The mind did. And so the experience changed. The implications for society. If individuals are ruled by untrained minds, so too are societies. War, injustice, environmental destruction. These are collective manifestations of fear, greed, and ignorance. But if enough individuals train the mind, cultivate clarity, compassion, and wisdom, the collective field shifts. This is why the Buddha's teaching is not escapist. It is revolutionary. It suggests that the most radical act is to train your own mind. The most urgent activism begins not with slogans, but with self-awareness. From there, right action flows. Conclusion, the power is closer than you think. The Buddha began his most famous text not with cosmic metaphysics, but with this simple truth. Mind precedes all things. He knew we would look everywhere else for salvation. Other people, success, escape, distraction, even religion. But he pointed us home. To the mind. The mirror. The garden. The forerunner of joy and sorrow. To realize this is not easy. It takes practice, humility, and courage. But if you commit to observing the mind, you begin to see, you are not its slave. You are its shaper. And the power to shape it. Toward peace, wisdom, and freedom has been in your hands all along. As the mind is, so is the world. May we each learn to see clearly, love deeply, and live wisely. Beginning with the next thought. 2. No one saves us but ourselves, the Buddha's radical call to inner responsibility. Inspired by oneself is evil done, by oneself is one defiled. By oneself is evil left undone, by oneself is one purified. Purity and impurity depend on oneself. No one can purify another. Dhammapada, verse 165. A teaching that both frees and frightens. Among all of the Buddha's teachings, perhaps none strike the modern ego more directly than this one. No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. In an age that oscillates between dependency and despair. Where we are constantly urged to find help, solutions, or rescue out there. This is a jolting reminder. The Buddha's words are not soothing in the conventional sense. They don't promise comfort or protection. They promise freedom. But at a price, complete responsibility. This is not a denial of support, compassion, or interdependence. Rather, it is a reclamation of agency. It means that your liberation does not hinge on luck, on divine intervention, or on the approval of others. It depends on you. This essay will explore the profound implications of this teaching, psychologically, spiritually, and practically. What does it mean to truly stand on your own feet? Not in isolation, but in dignity. What does it mean to stop waiting and start walking? The myth of external salvation. Human beings are conditioned to seek salvation outside themselves. In times of crisis, we pray, plead, protest. We ask the gods for mercy, or the universe for signs. We believe that love, money, status, or success will make us whole. And when none of that delivers lasting peace, we despair. Or look for someone to blame. This cycle of seeking, clinging, disappointment is what Buddhism calls samsara. It is the wheel of suffering that keeps turning because we look in the wrong place for freedom. The Buddha's teaching cuts through this illusion: no one can purify another. Not even a god, a guru, or the Buddha himself can do it for you. They can point the way, inspire you, challenge you, but no one can walk the path for you. This is both sobering and empowering. Sobering, because it dismantles fantasy. Empowering, because it gives the power back to where it always was, within. Self-reliance versus egoism. It's important to clarify what the Buddha meant by self-reliance. This teaching is not a celebration of the ego or hyper-individualism. It does not mean, do everything alone, or, you don't need anyone. The Buddha himself lived in community, encouraged noble friendship, Kalyamattata, and taught compassion as a central virtue. But he made one thing clear. No matter how much others love you, support you, or believe in you, they cannot do your inner work. They cannot meditate for you. They cannot face your cravings, your fears, your karma. Only you can do that. This is not a rejection of connection. It is a call to integrity. To walk the path not because someone else says so, but because you see the value. Because you feel the suffering. Because you want to be free. The psychology of ownership. From a psychological perspective, the Buddha's teaching is a masterclass in self-agency. Many people today feel powerless, paralyzed by external circumstances or internal traumas. The narrative becomes, I can't change because they hurt me, or I'll be happy when they come back, or it's not my fault. While these feelings may be rooted in real pain, they can also become prisons. When we give away our power to the past, to others, or to fate, we forfeit the only true place of transformation, this moment, this choice, this breath. To say, no one saves us but ourselves, is not to blame the victim. It is to offer a path out of victimhood. It is to say, yes, you were hurt, but your healing is in your hands now. Yes, the world is chaotic. But your peace is not dependent on it. This shift from external blame to internal responsibility is the pivot point of awakening. Walking the path, what it actually means. The Buddha often said that he did not save anyone, he only showed the way. The path he pointed to was the Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Each step is a practice of self-purification, not moralism, but clarity. It's about aligning your life with truth, so that suffering falls away naturally. But the key is this: you must walk. No teacher can meditate for you. No book can undo your karma. No amount of wishing can replace working with your mind, again and again. In this light, the path is not a mystical journey. It is painfully, beautifully ordinary. It is showing up each day to face your mind, your choices, your reactions, with honesty and compassion. The temptation to wait for rescue. Even those on spiritual paths are not immune to the subtle hope that someone or something else will do the heavy lifting. We think, maybe this next retreat will fix me. Maybe if I find the right teacher, I'll be enlightened. Maybe the universe will send me a sign. But the Buddha, even in his final moments, warned against this. His last words were, "Be a light unto yourselves. Work out your liberation with diligence." This is not a rejection of teachers. It is a rejection of passivity. The path is not about being saved. It is about waking up. And that can only happen from within. Freedom through effort, not magic. In many traditions, liberation is seen as a gift, a grace bestowed by a higher power. But in Buddhism, effort, viriya, is one of the core spiritual faculties. Not effort in the sense of struggle, but as steadfast engagement with the present. The Buddha taught that everything wholesome in life, peace, joy, wisdom, compassion, must be cultivated. You don't just stumble upon enlightenment. You grow it. This is deeply democratic. It means that awakening is not for the elite or the chosen. It's for anyone willing to show up, again and again, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Real-life reflections, stories of self-reliant transformation. 1. A woman leaving a toxic relationship finally realizes that no apology, no change from the other person will bring her peace. So she begins therapy, journaling, and meditation. Not to fix the past, but to build her own future. No one saved her. But she saved herself. 2. A man stuck in depression stops waiting for motivation. He begins walking 10 minutes a day, practicing gratitude, returning to his breath. Each small act builds a thread of self-trust. Freedom came not from inspiration, but from persistence. 3. A young person overwhelmed by anxiety learns to observe their thoughts instead of fighting them. No miracle cure. Just moment-by-moment awareness. Clarity becomes possible when ownership replaces avoidance. In each case, others may support, guide, or love them. But the turning point came when they chose to walk. Compassion and responsibility are not opposites. Sometimes, this teaching is misunderstood as cold or harsh. But in truth, it is compassion in its most courageous form. Because true compassion says, I believe in your strength. I trust your capacity. I will walk with you. But I will not walk for you. This is the compassion the Buddha showed. He did not infantilize. He did not promise magic. He offered a mirror and a map. And invited you to look and walk. In a culture that often swings between codependence and abandonment, this is a middle way, support with sovereignty. Collective healing through individual awakening. If no one can save us but ourselves, does that mean we shouldn't help each other? Quite the opposite. In Buddhism, individual awakening is the seed of collective healing. When you stop projecting your pain, you stop harming others. When you heal your mind, you become a refuge for those around you. Every step you take on your own path creates a ripple. Your self-reliance becomes a beacon. Your effort becomes inspiration. Your awakening becomes medicine for a suffering world. This is how true change happens. Not through force, but through inner transformation radiating outward. The sacred burden of your own freedom. The Buddha's teaching that no one saves us but ourselves is both a challenge and a gift. It means that there is no rescue coming. But there is a path. It means that no one can do it for you. But you are capable of doing it. It means that the work is yours. But so is the glory. To walk this path is not to walk alone. It is to walk awake. It is to step out of the illusion of helplessness and into the reality of conscious living. And when you truly realize this, when you stop waiting, blaming, or bargaining, you discover something astonishing. You were never powerless. Just untrained. Now is the time. The path is beneath your feet. No one else will walk it for you. But everything changes when you begin. 3. Hatred is never appeased by hatred, only by love is hatred overcome. Inspired by Dhammapada, verse 5, Na hai varina varani, samantata kadkana, avarina ca samanti, esa damo sanantano. A teaching for a divided world. Hatred is never ended by hatred. It is only ended by love. This is an eternal law. In this brief but thunderous statement, the Buddha offers not only a personal teaching but a global one. Across history and especially today, in a world fragmented by tribalism, conflict, online rage, and the weaponization of difference. This insight may be the most urgent spiritual medicine available. It is not merely a call for kindness. It is a radical psychological and ethical truth: hatred feeds itself. Every act of retaliation strengthens the cycle. Every moment of inner aversion tightens the knot. And the only force capable of truly dissolving this endless loop is love. Not sentimental love, but deep, courageous, clear-eyed compassion. In this essay, we will explore this teaching through the lenses of Buddhist psychology, modern conflict, and inner healing. What does it really mean to meet hatred with love? Is it weakness or wisdom? Can this principle be applied in personal life, in politics, and even in trauma? The Buddha's answer is not idealistic. It is revolutionary. The cycle of hatred, a psychological mechanism. Hatred, Vera, in the Buddhist understanding is not only explosive anger. It includes resentment, bitterness, subtle aversion, and the mental pattern of us versus them. It often arises when we feel hurt, threatened, or powerless. Hatred promises power but delivers poison. Psychologically, it operates like this. 1. We are hurt. 2. The ego contracts to protect itself. 3. It finds an enemy to blame. 4. That enemy becomes dehumanized. 5. Action is taken. Whether in speech, thought, or deed that mirrors the very violence we fear. The mind says, if I return the pain, I regain power. But the Buddha saw deeply, this does not end pain. It only multiplies it. This is the wheel of samsara. The cycle of reactivity that keeps individuals, families, and nations in suffering. Only by refusing to spin it further. By responding in a new way. Can we step off the wheel. The illusion of justice through retaliation. Many people resist this teaching because they believe hatred is justified. They hurt me. I have the right to hate. Yes, you do. But what does that hatred cost you? In moments of rage, it feels like we are claiming justice. But hatred is not the same as justice. Hatred clouds discernment. It makes us react instead of respond. And it leads to more suffering, not less. Retaliation rarely brings healing. It often brings guilt, escalation, and long-term karmic consequences. Justice is important. But it must be rooted in clarity, not vengeance. The Buddha's wisdom was not naive. He saw the horrors of war, betrayal, and abuse. But he also saw that the only true peace arises when we stop feeding the mental fire of animosity. The power of non-hatred, what love really means. When the Buddha says hatred is overcome by love, avera or metta, he does not mean passive tolerance. He means an active, fierce, unshakable goodwill. A refusal to allow the poison of hatred to dictate your mind. This kind of love has 3 qualities. 1. Clarity. It sees the other person as a being trapped in their own delusion, pain, and conditioning. 2. Courage. It stands firm in compassion even when provoked. 3. Commitment. It chooses to respond skillfully instead of reactively, again and again. Love in this sense is a strength, not a weakness. It is not a surrender of boundaries, but the claiming of inner sovereignty. To hate is easy. To love, in the face of hatred, is a revolutionary act of freedom. Historical echoes, the lives that embodied this teaching. This teaching has been echoed through time in the lives of those who chose compassion over revenge. Even in the face of great harm. The Buddha himself, after surviving multiple assassination attempts and slander, never retaliated with hatred. He simply continued teaching. Martin Luther King Jr. preached nonviolence not just as a strategy, but as a spiritual principle. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Nelson Mandela, after decades of imprisonment, chose reconciliation instead of revenge. His compassion helped rebuild a nation. These were not weak men. They were rooted in something deeper than the reflex to strike back. They were rooted in the truth the Buddha pointed to: hatred ends only through love. Modern parallels: hatred in the digital age. In the era of social media, hatred has become amplified and monetized. Outrage drives engagement. Algorithms reward conflict. We are increasingly conditioned to dehumanize those who disagree with us. Political discourse becomes war. Opinion becomes identity. Disagreement becomes enmity. But what if, instead of reacting, we paused? What if we practiced seeing the fear behind the anger, the hurt behind the aggression? This is what the Buddha asks: can you see the suffering behind the mask of hate? It doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior. But it means refusing to let your mind be hijacked by hatred in return. Internalizing the teaching, hatred of self. One of the most overlooked forms of hatred is self-hatred. We carry old shame, guilt, or regret. We replay mistakes. We believe we are unworthy. This hatred may be subtle, a chronic inner critic, or intense, like despair. But it is just as corrosive as external animosity. The Buddha's teaching applies here too. Self-hatred is never healed by more self-hatred. Only by compassion toward ourselves, acknowledging pain, but not clinging to it, can we be free. When we meet our inner wounds with love, we create the capacity to love others. Healing is not selfish. It is the ground of peace. The practice of metta. Training the heart. The Buddha offered a specific practice to train the heart in non-hatred, metta bhavana, the meditation on loving kindness. It begins with oneself. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be free from suffering. Then it extends to a loved one, to a neutral person, to a difficult person, to all beings. This is not just feel-good imagery. It is mental training. You are rewiring the mind to respond with goodwill rather than aversion. You are unlearning the reflex to harden, and learning instead to soften, wisely. Over time, this practice dissolves the boundaries of separation. You begin to see that everyone suffers. Everyone longs for safety. Everyone wants to be loved. Even those lost in hatred. Practical applications in conflict. So how do we actually live this teaching when confronted with hatred? 1. Pause before reacting. Even one breath can interrupt the momentum of anger. 2. Name what's happening internally. This is hatred arising. I choose not to feed it. 3. See the suffering in the other. Ask, what pain might they be carrying? 4. Set boundaries without violence. Compassion does not mean allowing abuse. But it means responding with clarity, not cruelty. 5. Wish them well. Even if silently. May they awaken from their suffering. This is not agreement. It is spiritual non-violence. These steps are not easy. But each one breaks the chain. Each one reclaims your freedom. What this teaching is not saying. Let's clarify a few misconceptions. It does not mean being passive. You can oppose injustice fiercely, but with love. It does not mean suppressing emotion. Feel your anger, but don't become it. Let it pass through, not take over. It does not mean enabling harm. True compassion may involve saying no, leaving a situation, or defending others. But the motivation is love, not vengeance. The fire goes out when you stop feeding it. The Buddha saw a truth that psychology, politics, and history have confirmed: hatred, when answered with more hatred, only grows stronger. But when hatred is met with love, the fire cannot sustain itself. It collapses under its own weight. The energy that fuels it is no longer present. This is not magic. It is cause and effect. You cannot control the hate of others. But you can choose not to mirror it. And in doing so, you become a force of peace in a world addicted to war. Hatred never ends through hatred. This is not idealism. This is Dharma. This is the timeless law of transformation. For peace is found in the present moment, living mindfully in a restless world. Inspired by the Buddha's frequent instruction in the Satipatthana Sutta, be mindful of the body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. In the present moment. The moment you're looking for is already here. We spend most of our lives looking forward. To the next milestone, the next relief, the next escape. Or we look backward. Analyzing the past, regretting, remembering, rewriting what cannot be undone. And while the body sits in one place, the mind spins 1,000 stories. Time feels fragmented. Life feels thin. Peace remains just beyond the next to-do list. But the Buddha, in his great simplicity, offered a stunningly clear antidote. Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. This is not a slogan. It is the very foundation of awakening. In Buddhist practice, the present moment is not just a strategy for stress relief. It is the only doorway to truth. It is where suffering is felt and where liberation begins. Everything else, past and future, are thoughts. Only the present is real. In this essay, we will explore the radical depth of this teaching, what it truly means to live in the now, how modern life pulls us away from it, and why presence is not merely awareness, but the ground of wisdom, compassion, and peace. The Buddha's method, 4 foundations of mindfulness. The Buddha laid out a precise method for cultivating presence in the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. He taught practitioners to pay deep, sustained attention to 1. The body, kayanupassana, breath, posture, movement, sensations. 2. Feelings, vedananyupassana, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral tones. 3. The mind, cittanupassana, states like restlessness, concentration, aversion. 4. Mental objects, dhammanupassana, such as the hindrances or the 4 noble truths. At its core, this is a practice of returning, again and again, to what is actually happening right now. Not theorizing about life, but directly experiencing it. The Buddha emphasized, this moment, fully seen, holds the truth of impermanence, non-self, and unsatisfactoriness. And thus, also the seed of liberation. The cost of leaving the now. Why is presence so hard? Modern life offers us infinite ways to escape the now. Endless media, scrolling, notifications, consumption, multitasking. We rarely just sit, breathe, and feel without needing to improve, distract, or explain. This constant forward motion comes at a price. Anxiety about the future. Regret over the past. Disconnection from the body. Insensitivity to others. Alienation from the sacredness of daily life. Presence becomes something exotic. A retreat thing, a spiritual luxury. But to the Buddha, it is the most ordinary and essential discipline. It is the path itself. To be present is not just to pay attention. It is to remember that life only happens now. Anything else is a story. The nature of time, a Buddhist view. In Western thought, time is often seen as linear. Past, present, future. But Buddhism sees time more experientially. The past exists only in memory. The future only in imagination. All that truly exists is the flow of present moment experience. This is not philosophy. It is a call to awareness. When you touch the present fully, something opens. You realize that the past is only alive through the thought, I remember. The future is only alive through the thought, what if? Both are mental events arising now. This doesn't mean you forget the past or stop planning wisely. But it means you stop living in exile. Suspended between stories, missing your life. The Buddha said, there is only one time when one can see clearly. That time is now. Being present is not being passive. Another misconception is that present moment awareness makes you passive or disengaged. As if it means doing nothing, zoning out, or being okay with injustice. But presence is not passivity. It is radical receptivity. It means being so awake that you no longer react from habit, but respond from clarity. When you're present, you speak with intention, not impulse. You listen deeply, not defensively. You act skillfully, not reactively. The present moment is where ethical discernment happens. It's where compassion arises. It's where the path unfolds. Far from being a retreat from the world, presence allows you to meet it fully. Mindfulness in action, daily life as practice. Mindfulness is not limited to meditation. The Buddha taught that every activity can be a field of presence. Walking, eating, brushing your teeth, listening, arguing, crying. The key is remembering. Coming back again and again to what's really happening. What does this breath feel like? What emotion is present right now? Is this thought helpful or just habit? This is not about perfection. It is about returning. Even noticing distraction is part of presence. In that moment of recognition, I was lost. You are already back. This kind of practice gradually transforms your life. It brings a sense of intimacy, humility, and spaciousness into everything you do. You are no longer living from autopilot. You are alive. Presence in suffering. The courage to stay. Perhaps the most powerful application of this teaching is in how we meet pain. When discomfort arises. Physical, emotional, relational. Our instinct is to escape. We distract, deny, blame, or numb. But the Buddha taught that suffering increases when we resist the present. The core practice becomes, can I stay? Can I stay with this breath, even if it's shallow? Can I stay with this grief, without collapsing into identity? Can I feel this fear, without needing it to go away? In staying, something shifts. The pain is no longer a prison. It becomes a teacher. You realize, this too is impermanent. This too is not me. This too can be held with compassion. Presence doesn't remove pain. It transforms your relationship to it. Joy in the now, the forgotten doorway. Presence is not only for facing pain. It is also the gateway to joy. So much beauty is missed because we are elsewhere. Worrying, rushing, comparing. But when you come fully into the now, a cup of tea becomes sacred. The sound of rain becomes music. A friend's face becomes a revelation. The Buddha once said, "The greatest happiness is freedom from the agitation of time." Real joy is not found in possessions or perfect circumstances. It is found in undivided attention to what already is. This joy is quiet, but deep. It is not the thrill of gain, but the warmth of presence. Obstacles to presence, the 5 hindrances. The Buddha taught that 5 mental states obstruct presence. These are 1. Sensual desire, seeking stimulation or pleasure. 2. Aversion, resistance, anger, hatred. 3. Sloth and torpor, dullness, fatigue. 4. Restlessness and worry, agitation, regret, anxiety. 5. Doubt, indecision, inner conflict. These are not sins, but conditions to be understood. When they arise, the task is not to fight them, but to observe them clearly. Ah, here is restlessness. Here is craving. Let me breathe with it. This gentle awareness itself is transformative. It breaks the trance. You are no longer possessed. You are present. Presence and non-self, where identity softens. In deep presence, something unexpected happens. The sense of a fixed self begins to dissolve. Normally, we think, I am sad, I am afraid, I am this or that. But in mindful awareness, you begin to see. Sadness is arising. Fear is passing. Thoughts come and go. You are not the contents of consciousness. You are the space of awareness in which they move. This insight is at the heart of Buddhist liberation. It does not mean you disappear. It means the rigid identity that suffers softens. You no longer cling to being someone. You simply are. This is where peace deepens into freedom. Modern science confirms it, presence heals. Neuroscience now confirms what the Buddha taught, that mindfulness changes the brain. Regular presence-based practices reduce activity in the default mode network, associated with rumination. Lower cortisol, stress hormone. Increase gray matter in areas linked to emotional regulation. Enhance immune response and attention span. These are not side effects. They are results of living closer to life. What the Buddha called awakening, modern science now calls neuroplasticity. What matters is that returning to now is healing. Real-life stories of presence. 1. A mother with a sick child stays with her breath as she sits by the hospital bed. Instead of spiraling into fear, she anchors herself in presence. Her calm becomes the child's refuge. 2. A young man facing burnout begins a simple daily walk without phone or agenda. He learns to see trees again. To feel his body again. Life reopens. 3. An elderly woman in grief learns to sit with her sorrow. Not to fix it. Just to feel it fully. Over time, the grief becomes sacred, not just sad. Presence doesn't fix everything. But it changes everything. Conclusion: this moment is the gateway. The Buddha did not teach presence as a tactic. He taught it as a way of being. Why? Because this moment is where life is. This moment is where suffering arises. This moment is where awakening begins. All your plans, your regrets, your searching. They can only happen in thought. The present is not a concept. It is a direct experience. Right now. Feel your breath. Listen to sound. Notice sensation. You're already here. What you seek is not later. It is now. The question is, will you show up for your own life? Peace is found in the present moment. The past is memory. The future is idea. The present is real. And it is enough. 5. The greatest victory is to conquer oneself, the path of inner mastery in a world obsessed with winning. Inspired by Dhammapada verse 103, though one may conquer 1,000 men in battle 1,000 times, yet he who conquers himself is the greatest of conquerors. What does it mean to truly win? We live in a world that glorifies conquest. The conqueror is praised. The one who dominates, achieves, and outperforms is seen as powerful. Nations celebrate victories in war. People boast about wins in business, sports, or even arguments. Success is measured by how much you can control, surpass, and accumulate. But the Buddha offers a quiet, astonishing reversal. Better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles. This statement isn't poetic hyperbole. It is an invitation to reimagine power. Not as domination over others, but as deep, courageous mastery over one's own mind. In this essay, we'll dive deeply into what it means to conquer oneself. What are the inner battles we all face? How is this conquest different from repression? And why is this inner victory the most meaningful achievement a human being can attain? What is the self we're asked to conquer? In Buddhist psychology, the self is not a fixed identity, but a collection of patterns. Mental habits, emotional reactions, clinging tendencies, and delusions. To conquer oneself is not to destroy oneself. It is to overcome. Craving, the endless hunger for more, better, different. Aversion, the pushback against discomfort, blame, or pain. Delusion, the fog of misperception, confusion, and self-centeredness. Ego, the belief in a solid, separate identity that must be defended. These forces operate within all of us. They're not unique to bad people. They are universal energies that, left unexamined, govern our lives. The Buddha's path is not about judging them, but seeing them clearly and working with them skillfully. To conquer oneself is to become the master, not the slave, of your inner world. The inner battlefield, everyday conflicts within. You don't need to be in a monastery or facing a major life crisis to see the inner battle. It happens every day. You want to meditate, but you scroll on your phone instead. You feel anger, but know that reacting will hurt someone. You want to eat mindfully, but fall into compulsion. You long for love, but sabotage it with fear or control. You resolve to speak kindly, but sarcasm leaps out before you realize. Each of these moments is a micro-battle. Not between good and bad, but between habit and awareness. The question is, who is in charge? The mind, conditioned by past impulses? Or the awakened presence that sees through them? The greatest victory is not perfection. It is the moment you notice a harmful pattern, pause, and choose differently. That is real strength. Why conquering others cannot free you? You can dominate others and still be a prisoner of your own mind. History is full of powerful leaders. Kings, warriors, CEOs. Who won empires but lived in fear, greed, paranoia, or despair. External victory is seductive, but it doesn't guarantee peace. In fact, it often breeds more restlessness. Now I must keep it. Now I must defend it. The Buddha saw that true peace can't be taken from you. Because it doesn't depend on anyone else. It arises from a mind that is unattached to praise or blame. Stable amidst gain or loss. Kind in the face of harm. Clear even when confused. To conquer yourself means your happiness is no longer held hostage by circumstances. That is true sovereignty. Not suppression, but transformation. Some here conquer oneself and assume it means repressing desires, feelings, or instincts. But the Buddha taught the opposite. The path is not about violent self-denial. It is about transformation through awareness. For example, you don't kill desire. You understand its root and soften its grip. You don't crush anger. You see its pain and channel its energy wisely. You don't shame fear. You bring compassion to it and walk with courage anyway. This is not a war against yourself. It is a liberation from being ruled by your unconscious habits. In Buddhist terms, it is freeing yourself from the three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. Not by force, but by wisdom. The weapons of inner victory: mindfulness, discipline, compassion. If the goal is inner mastery, what are the tools? 1. Mindfulness, sati, the ability to notice, in real time, what is arising. Without this, you are lost in reaction. 2. Discipline, viriya, not rigid control, but energetic effort. The willingness to stay present even when it's uncomfortable. 3. Compassion, karu, because inner conquest without kindness becomes self-violence. Together, these three allow you to face your inner dragons. Not with a sword, but with steady attention and an open heart. The long arc of inner work, no quick victories. Conquering oneself is not a one-time act. It is a lifelong path. There will be setbacks. Old patterns will return. Some days will feel like defeat. But every moment is an invitation to begin again. The Buddha himself spent 6 years in intense inner struggle before attaining enlightenment. He faced doubt, fear, restlessness, even despair. But he didn't give up. And when he finally touched full awakening, it wasn't with fireworks. It was with peace. Your journey will have its own flavor. The point is not how fast you win, but how deeply you commit to showing up for the battle with awareness and love. The role of meditation, the training ground of the mind. Meditation is often misunderstood as an escape. But in truth, it is the training ground for this inner conquest. In sitting meditation, you watch the mind. You see how often thoughts pull you away. How strong the craving for distraction is. How reactive your body becomes to subtle feelings. And yet, you stay. That staying, gently returning, again and again, is an act of power. Over time, it strengthens the muscle of presence. You begin to notice the mind's tricks. And you start to choose freedom over compulsion. Meditation isn't the battlefield itself. It's where you prepare, so that in daily life, you can meet each moment with clarity. Real-life stories of inner conquest. 1. A recovering addict learns to observe urges without giving in. He trains himself to sit with discomfort. One day, in the middle of a craving, he chooses to breathe instead of escape. It seems small, but it's the victory of a lifetime. 2. A woman in conflict with her family pauses before speaking. She feels the familiar heat of blame. But instead of lashing out, she breathes, then speaks from love. A cycle that lasted years begins to break. 3. A student overwhelmed with anxiety chooses to stop identifying with her thoughts. These are not facts, she tells herself. Just weather in the mind. In that moment, fear loses its grip. In each case, no one else noticed. No trophies were awarded. But inside, a human being reclaimed their power. That is the Buddha's victory. The ripple effect of self-mastery. The Buddha didn't teach self-conquest for personal pride. He taught it because the world heals when individuals stop acting from unconscious pain. When you master yourself, you don't pass your suffering on to others. You break cycles of abuse, neglect, or reactivity. You become a refuge for those around you. You model another way of being. Grounded, wise, compassionate. This is how social change begins inside individual hearts. Not by dominating others, but by freeing yourself from the need to dominate at all. Self-conquest is the beginning of real peace. Ultimately, this teaching is about freedom. You are not here to win against others. You are here to wake up from the trance of ego. You are here to see clearly. Not just what is outside you, but what runs your inner world. And you are here to live with choice, not just reaction. The greatest victory is not one that leaves others defeated. It is the one that leaves you free. Not from life, but from the illusions that keep you from fully living. Conclusion: the hero's path is inward. Conquering oneself is a greater task than defeating thousands in battle. The Buddha said this not to shame external success, but to elevate the true path of the warrior. The inner path. You may never lead armies. You may never be rich or famous. You may never be successful by worldly standards. But if you face your mind honestly, if you meet your fear with compassion, if you train yourself in kindness and clarity, if you learn to pause before reacting, if you let go of the need to win and choose instead to wake up, then you have already won. Not once, but every day. These 5 teachings of the Buddha are not ancient relics, locked in temples or scrolls. They are living truths, echoing in your very breath, your pain, your longing, your love. To see anxiety not as an enemy, but as a signal. To loosen the grip of identity. And remember that you are not your story. To meet hatred not with more hatred, but with fierce, wise compassion. To come home to the present moment, where peace is always patiently waiting. And to realize, the greatest battle is not outside you. It is within. And the greatest victory is not control, but awakening. If even one of these truths touched you, let it settle in your heart. Let it speak in the quiet moments. Let it remind you, you are not broken. Just asleep. And every moment is a chance to wake up. This is not the end of learning. It is the beginning of remembering. So breathe. Let go. And walk gently onward. With wisdom in your steps. And compassion in your eyes.